Mary Beth, you're the best at summarizing things. Why don't you give us a brief of Dune Part One, and then tell us a brief of Dune Part Two, if you can.
Well, I'll try. It's all about the spice. Spice is a substance secreted by the giant sandworms on the desert planet Arrakis. It's essential for space travel. It has mind expanding properties for those who are sensitive to it. So it's the most valuable substance in the universe. And as we're told at the beginning of Dune Part 2, power over spice is power over all. And everybody wants that power. So in the first Dune, the emperor asked Duke Leo Atreides to go to Arrakis to be the governor there and oversee the spice mining operation. So he goes with his significant other, the Bene Gesserit sister, Lady Jessica, and their son Paul. But this is only a ruse to allow the Harkonnens, the former governors, to eliminate the Atreides once and for all. The Harkonnens attack, Duke Leto is killed, and Paul and Jessica are forced to flee to the desert. And they take refuge with the indigenous Arrakis people, the Fremen. So in Part 2, Paul is learning the ways of the desert from the Fremen people, particularly Chani, who he falls in love with, and Stilgar. And he ends up leading guerrilla attacks against the Harkonnens' spice mining operations, the machines and the soldiers who guard them. Meanwhile, Lady Jessica has the opportunity to become a Fremen Reverend Mother. She has to do so by imbibing the toxic water of life, which is also derived from the worms. She survives the experience and becomes a Reverend Mother, but she's pregnant. And that water of life breaches that placental barrier and affects her unborn fetus, who then has the mind of an adult while she's still in utero. She and Jessica plot to avenge Duke Leto and to get power for Paul. They use a Fremen prophecy about a Messiah who will come to free the Fremen people from their oppressors, which had been planted by the Bene Gesserit generations ago. In the meanwhile, the Harkonnens are not taking this lying down. They want to get rid of these Fremen attackers, and so they try to prevent it, to attack them and prevent it from happening, but they don't have much success against these guerrilla attackers. So the leader of the Harkonnens, the Baron, tasks one of his nephews, Feyd-Rautha, who's the psychotic guy, to take over the job. Meanwhile, Paul is having dreams in which he sees millions of people killed because of actions he takes, because of him, because he has accepted this Messiah prophecy. So he is fighting against this fate. But things spiral out of control and he can't resist it forever.
The one thing, I'm so glad you wrote the review for us because I felt like I was like, this movie, this doesn't need a review. It needs a syllabus. Like it's so much movie. What were your first impressions of it? What was the thing that knocked you over about it?
Well, it's just full of spectacle. Some people I know who watched the first Dune liked it, but thought it was a little slow, not much was happening. I said, wait till the second one. And sure enough, like I say in my review, it's just more. A lot of people have used the words epic, but you've got everything in there. You've got more battles, more explosions, more worms, more Bene Gesserit, just everything. And it's the first one was a feast for the eyes and ears. This one, even more so. It's spectacular.
Bill, what did you think of it?
The big thing for me in both films is the sense of scale. Like, you really do feel like you're in another world when you're watching these films. The way Denis Villeneuve and his effects team just construct everything from the tiniest grain of sand to these gigantic war machines and sandworms, you always get a sense of where you stand, whether you're, doing a silly walk through the desert to avoid the worms, or watching that tiny little Muad'Dib kangaroo mouse just flittering about. You almost feel like you could reach out and grab a handful of the sand and see the particles of spice melange within it. And it's never done in a way that's too flashy. A lot of the effects are a really great mix of digital and practical. subtle changes with the color palette to, turn their eyes blue when the spice affects them. The introduction scene for Fade Routha in this washed out gladiator arena where it's all done in black and white, but it's not a complete digital effect. They really did cake Austin Butler in this insane amount of white makeup and a black outfit, to do these scenes. And I think they shot those in Abu Dhabi, so it was like 130 degrees when they're doing this. The first film was very dense. It was a lot of table setting. There were so many characters to keep track of. There's still a little bit of that in this movie, but there's a whole lot more cutting to the chase. Like, we only have a couple of new characters in this film. Fade Routha, the Emperor, his daughter, that we really need to keep track of. Everybody else we're already established with, and we can kind of just watch their journey unfold now. And that really aids in the immersive, almost interactive process of not just seeing this movie, but in experiencing it.
They shot most of it in a real desert. You could feel the heat coming off of this, like you really could. I don't know if it was seeing it on the big screen or mainly because you get more into the characters in part two, but in the first Dune, I really didn't feel much for the characters. I really was like, okay, this is a bunch of rich people doing, and then my sort of point of contact, my point of empathy was the Zendaya character. I felt for her the most, and I felt because she's trying to do the right thing by her people, but she's also in love with Paul, but you can see that she sees that this is going downhill quick, and, there may be nothing left of her planet, of her relationship. I didn't realize it at first, but I was like, that's actually the sympathetic character.
That was one of the major points that Villeneuve did in altering the source material and departing from the previous version from the 80s that David Lynch did. He made Chani into a much more fully realized character with agency and a perspective of her own, rather than her just being the love interest.
I also have to call out the other two really good performances here, which is Timothee Chalamet as Paul and Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica, because they both go much deeper into these characters this time around than last time. Rebecca Ferguson was great last time, but she's even better now. She's so ruthlessly manipulative. She just lets nothing stand in her way. And Timothee Chalamet, goes to, I feel like a darker place than we've ever seen him go before. And you can tell that the expectations everyone has of him are just wearing on him.
Let's talk about some of the themes, because I don't think religion does great in this movie. There's a lot of allegories. I mean, I kept seeing stuff like, of course, the Middle East. That's the biggest one. People have compared spice with oil for forever. It's Afghanistan. It's Vietnam. It's, all of these, what happens when you mess with an indigenous people type warfare.
Well, this is one reason I think that Dune continues to be so popular. There was a series of 6 novels to start with that were written by Frank Herbert. And it's because it's not just, space cowboys. It's really weighty, real world stuff that goes on in there, colonialism and, all of its horrible effects, like you just mentioned. And then religion. Boy, in the books after this, religion is a really big deal. Here we see how a religion starts. There's a hero. The hero becomes a legend, and then the legend becomes a god, and a religion starts, and it's out of control. You see the beginnings of that here with this prophecy. Some of the Fremen think that Paul is their foretold Messiah, and they believe in him. Others, like Chani, don't. She's really suspicious of all of this. So, the religion comes in for a real dissection.
She even says, she's like, this prophecy is how they enslave us. It's not subtle, but it's effective. That's another reason why I think I sympathize with her character, because she's in this world where she sees all of these people with this blind belief, especially Javier Bardem's character, who was, he doesn't get much to do in the first film. Though I thought he was very good, he gets a lot to do in the second film, and man, is he great. he really sells that zealot kind of, and he's not. You feel like there's an innocence to him in
Yeah.
that zealotry too. You don't feel like he's
He's
proselytizing to, self-aggrandizing himself or anything like
yeah.
that.
He's not doing it for power. He's doing it because he really believes this will free his people.
True
Yeah.
believer, yeah.
One of the biggest criticisms I usually have with religious films is that whatever the messianic or fundamentalist or dogmatic angle is, that's taken as read, that's taken as a given, that as an understood truth that you start from, rather than asking the questions and seeing how you can come by these beliefs. This film, on the other hand, does show that there's the very real perceptions of colonialism and manipulation that the Bene Gesserit do, that Jessica does, that Chani sees. But you also see someone like Stilgar, who comes by his fanaticism quite honestly. It's like, and there is weirdly a positive result from that, because it is a unifying force for the Fremen to get them to unite behind Paul and fight the good fight and basically put their tribal differences aside for the sake of this common goal. I mean, there's been a lot of memeing of Stilgar's character, the fact that Paul says he's not a messiah, and then he goes, see, he's too humble to say that. Like, it's Life of Brian, almost. It's like the Messiah says he's not the Messiah. No, he's a very naughty boy. But it's like, but again, you can see how people are led and how some others actively choose this angle, whether it's delusional or not. They choose it because it gives them something to cling to, and that is worthwhile and valuable. I love, as you said, it's not subtle, but it is very nuanced, and I'm very appreciative of that as someone who is not religious and has an objection to religious angles in films sometimes. This is the way you're going to do it if you're going to do it.
The other thing, speaking of the religious aspect, is the Bene Gesserit mother, is Charlotte Rampling. When you first see her, you're like, wow, she's a force to be reckoned with. She has that first scene with Paul, where, put your hand in the box thing, which they also do in David Lynch's Dune. But it was a really powerful scene. But then we get to see her with the Emperor's daughter, played by Florence Pugh, and you're like, oh, she's evil. Like, she's on another level of manipulation. These people think in centuries, not years or decades. They are and they're thinking generationally about what they're going to do, because remember, Paul was not supposed to be a boy, and she was kind of miffed about that.
You're mentioning their breeding program, which, I mean, think about that.
You got like eugenics in there,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Like, that's like Nazi level evil. I kind of also wonder, it's very Machiavellian. It's very like the power behind the throne. The other thing that in terms of the characters was like I think everybody pretty much gets to shine, and you see everybody's perspective. Everybody there has different motivations for being there. Like, I was really impressed with the character arc that they gave some of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Paul actually gets a character arc. He's not just a figurehead, or like, because how many times have we seen a movie like The Prophesied One or The Chosen One? But he actually gets to be conflicted about it, and very convincingly. That was, it was powerful, and it was really well done.
One of the things I loved about this is the fact that Denis Villeneuve, he's challenging the audience to basically say, Paul is the hero because he's taking the hero's journey, but what about him actually makes him heroic? Between him and the Reverend Mother that Charlotte Rampling plays, we get a very real firsthand lesson in how power corrupts. We get to see it play out almost in real time. And yeah, we root for Paul because he's the underdog, because his family is the one that got targeted. But he does take some actions that may end up being a net positive, but certainly aren't heroic in the moment. Again, a tremendous amount of nuance in the storytelling on this that just absolutely blows me away.
And then you get the power of the Emperor, played by the almighty Christopher Walken, who I was very happy did not go full Walken in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, the last thing, like, if he had been like, I'm the emperor. Like if he had gone full walk-in, it would have just taken everybody out of it. But
Who
um,
is this Muad'Dib that you speak of?
we
Is Paul
gotta
Atreides somehow alive?
we gotta take down the Fremen. It would have been, I mean, talk about memes. But like I thought, I think people kind of forgot that Christopher Walken can act. He's an Oscar winner.
Yep.
He won an Oscar for Deer Hunter years ago, but he can actually play characters when he's not just doing the Christopher Walken thing. I think they use him sparingly and in the right amounts. And Florence Pugh also gets some nice moments as well. Besides looking just kind of freaky gorgeous in that headdress thing that they had
Yeah.
her up in. That thing was amazing.
If I ever go to a convention and someone cosplays that dress properly, I will propose on the spot. I'm just going to put it out there.
Well, and let's talk about the real scene stealer here, who is Austin Butler as Fade Routha. Oh, he is so amazing. Fade is charismatic and psychotic as all get out, a casual killer. And, all the Harkonnen are pale and bald, but he also has his teeth blacked out. And when he opens his mouth, it's just so freaky. And his performance is way out there. He performs in these rigged gladiatorial contests on the Harkonnen homeworld, Gady Prime, and Bill, you mentioned the stark black and white of those scenes. They actually filmed those in infrared with a special camera, so there's none of the gray tones of regular black and white film. It's amazing to watch. But then Austin Butler is amazing to watch, and yet they give him a vulnerability. The Bene Gesserit kind of go after him as maybe an alternative to Paul, and they have this whole dossier on him, and they say that he is vulnerable around issues of humiliation and pain, and you see a moment of that, and you go, oh wait, this psychotic guy even has his own weaknesses. So all of the characters are really fleshed out.
I mean, in fairness, if Leia Seydoux came on to me, I'd have a hard time thinking straight as well. But no, I absolutely love Austin Butler's performance here. Like in the first film that David Lynch did, Sting plays Fade Routha, and it's a pure camp performance. It's there to be so bad it's good, and you just kind of Mystery Science Theater love to laugh at it. Here he's a serious character. He's just as nuts. He's just as out there, but there's this weird, committed, insane dignity to him. I remember, I had to check myself multiple times because the way Butler plays him, especially when he's walking solitary through the hallways and lowering his head just like this, but looking up. I saw Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise with the hair removed. That's how creepy intense he was. But again, all of it germane to his character, to the story as it's presented, and with a motivation that he comes by honestly. Like you said, he's vulnerable to humiliation because he's the second fiddle to Dave Bautista's character. He's the skinnier one. He's not as intimidating a presence physically. So you might underestimate him as a strategic threat, as a tactician, and as a lethal force. So he dedicates himself to proving everyone wrong. I mean, it's massive foreshadowing when he finishes the gladiator battle and whispers, "You fought well, Atreides," to his last victim. You know that's going to come back on him, even if you don't know the story. That's just basic scripting 101. But you also know that when it comes back, it's actually going to have impact. And again, given the just pure bonkers interpretation that Sting gave 40 years ago, that is immense. I have just loved watching Austin Butler develop as an actor between Elvis, and as audiences will get to see in June in The Bike Riders. The man is extremely versatile
and immersive into those characters.
Exactly.
I saw him on a talk show, and they were talking about the design of the character, and he was wearing this sort of bald cap with an appliance for his eyebrows because he doesn't have eyebrows either, which just makes everybody look weird. And I got some serious I think, I got some serious like Slytherin moments from him. Like at one point I thought he spoke parcel tongue. Like he's got like a weird affect to his voice. What I also love about him is how he's the polar opposite of Paul. And that is very much Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars, where all the good guys are like in earth tones and browns and greens and stuff, and all the bad guys are stark black and white. Does anybody know if the next movie is green lit? Do you know if we got
Not officially, but it's going to be. But it will
It
be.
will be. Denny Villeneuve is writing the script right now, and apparently won't be greenlit until the script is completed.
I don't know anything about the next one. I just this one I thought left in a great place. I thought and I'm really glad they didn't try to make this one movie. Um, my one probably criticism of it is that it's almost too much for one film. Like part two itself is too much to me. It's almost too much. First of all, it's damn near 3 hours. There was no intermission, you know, and I had a large soda. Like it's not logistically, it's not great. But other than that, you must see it in a theater, I think, because like I said, when I saw the first one, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. But I had the same complaints. There's a lot of table setting. It's a little bit slow. I feel like I'm reading the cliff notes of a movie kind of thing. And then, but the second one, you're right in you get thrown right into the action. I also found with the second one, I don't know if it's because it was more action oriented, but I was definitely more engaged with the characters. I did not care about the characters in the first movie all that much. I felt like I was, watching this big story unfold, and I was certainly appreciating things from a technical perspective. But I don't feel like I I didn't feel like I watched a movie kind of thing. I don't feel like I got the story or the pathos or the catharsis with the characters. This time around, I did.
It's appropriate that you mention Empire Strikes Back because when I was watching this, I very much got an Empire or Godfather Part 2 vibe from it in the sense that this is that rare sequel that arguably outdoes its original in terms of overall quality. And with the high likelihood of a third installment, if there's any one flaw to be had with this movie is, are we going to get Return of the Jedi or are we going to get Godfather 3? That's my biggest concern at this point. And that's a testament to how great this film is, because if that's the only thing I'm worried about when I come out of this thing in 2 hours and 45 minutes, you've done your job.
Out of My Mind. It is courtesy of Disney, and it is adapted from the New York Times bestseller by the same title by Sharon M. Draper. I have to say, I work in education. I'm a speech pathologist. This people basically how this came to be was the producer Peter Saraf. He was there doing a Q&A. His daughter, when she was in about fourth grade, read this book in class. They had to, and she went to him and said, "I want you to make a movie out of this." And it took about 10 years. So this is like 10 years later because she's in college now, his daughter. And he did make it. So this book, this movie, sorry, is about stars the main character is called Melody Brooks, and she has cerebral palsy. She's nonverbal. She's 12 years old. She's in an electric wheelchair. She really can't do anything. She can't, obviously she can't walk. She can't talk. She can't bathe herself. She can't go to the bathroom by herself. She can't really feed herself. And this is should say who's it's starring. The newcomer Phoebe Ray Taylor plays Melody Brooks, and she does have CP in real life. Amazing actress. Rosemary DeWitt is in it. She's plays the mother. Luke Kirby, he plays the dad. Judith Light is in it. She's a neighbor. Jennifer Aniston is the narrator. She is the voice of Melody because Melody can choose any voice she wants. And this takes place in the early 2000s, and she loves Friends and she loves Jennifer Aniston. It's adorable. And so their life gets a little shooken up because this educator who works at the local university, she has her doctorate, um, wants to try mainstreaming Melody into a general education sixth grade classroom because Melody is actually super, super smart. And she had been in their special ed program, basically in a trailer off of the school, which I've heard about. I have not seen that, thankfully, in my district, but I have heard about that. The program's placed, actually in a different building from the school and wanted to challenge her. And what's great about this movie is we get completely immersed in Melody's world because we obviously can hear all her thoughts and feelings. And it's this one again, I was like, this one I was bawling throughout the entire thing. She is a typical 12-year-old and wants and desires all the things a typical 12-year-old girl wants. And it was heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. Um, and this actress to, you know, act with just the emotions on her face and just amazing. She was amazing. And she does, and this is not really giving anything away, she does get what they call an augmentative communication device. So you can hear a voice through, it's like a little computer and she types in what she wants to say. And that is part of it. I thought it was going to center a lot on that actually at first, but it's not really. It's really about self-advocacy, and looking at people in a different way that have disabilities, don't underestimate them. Let me think what else. It was very touching, and coming from being a speech pathologist where I help people communicate, it definitely hit home. I don't work with augmentative communication devices. I have not worked with that, just very little when I was in grad school. So I don't have a ton of experience with that at all. But I hope that in comparison to what was happening in this movie at that time, the special ed hopefully has evolved. um, from what I see where I work, not underestimating kids like maybe they did back then just by going by looks. Um, and yeah, on the outside.
Now, do you know if it was based on a book? Was the book a novel or like a true story?
So that was the book was a novel, and I actually asked that question at the panel because they mentioned that the author was a teacher in Ohio for many years, revered, and I'm like, wait a minute. There has got to be someone she knows with cerebral palsy. There's no way she could know all this unless she did a ton of research. So the author just recently shared publicly at the Sundance Film Festival that her daughter has cerebral palsy. And the producer who was at the Q&A said, I know I can share this because she did there, and she's been very private about it. And when I did ask, I said, was the character based off of a real person? He said somewhat. So he did, say exactly, but yeah, so I figured. And she did write, there's a sequel, Out of My Heart, I think. And then she's working, and they are writing a script for that, I heard. And she is working on a third book, I believe, too, which again, I was like, I can't believe I never heard of this. And I work at a school. Yeah. And even though, yeah, it's Disney, there's definitely that Disney touch. The fact that obviously they worked for a long time on this, and they worked hard, I think, to get where they're at.
Well, I wanted to front load some of the award winners because, as you know, they always give out awards. They had over 90 premieres this year at the festival for its 40th anniversary. And one of the first award winners that I saw won the award for the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award. And that was given to Jesse Eisenberg, the actor, who was turned filmmaker, for his sophomore film called A Real Pain. Now, his first film was called When You Finish Saving the World, which is a family dramedy. This, A Real Pain, extends that family dramedy into a relationship between two cousins. So he and Kieran Culkin, but they play the cousins. Jesse Eisenberg plays David, and Kieran Culkin plays Benji. After the untimely passing of their grandmother, They were given an inheritance with the intent to spend it to go to Poland and tour her motherland and see what her experience was as she survived the Holocaust. So it starts with them meeting in the airport and flying to Poland. And right away you get a sense of, which one is the more accomplished, which one's kind of the hapless layabout. But as the film goes on and these characters begin to grow and begin to interact with each other and with the tour group that they're on, you start to see, the cracks beneath the perfect veneer of the put together one. You start to see the real authenticity and veracity of the hapless one. And Kieran Culkin gives a dynamite performance in this. And I can see why it won a screenwriting award, because it's very, very funny while still being authentic and real,
like a
and
dramedy
hilarious.
type.
Yes, absolutely. So there were parts I laughed out loud. This film had the best use of the word boner I've heard in a screenplay in quite some time. I was in tears. But there's some great visuals. There's a moment where they are touring an old camp and you see this cage that's like a cattle cage. It runs the length of a warehouse full of shoes. And those shoes used to have feet in them.
Oh my God.
It's breathtaking, and it's just sobering. It's just such a great movie. I loved A Real Pain.
So this is his sophomore. Did you see his first film?
I still haven't seen it. I really want to. I tried to do so before this because, I knew I was watching a second film, but I don't know that it's necessary. But based on the strength of this one, I know the man can make a good movie. So yeah, I do want to see it.
It's funny because to me, Jesse Eisenberg was just from the Social Network.
Mhm.
He was Mark Zuckerberg, and then he did that awful Lex Luthor.
Yeah,
and Batman
we
v
don't talk
Superman.
about that.
Yeah, it was just so sad. But I saw him in the Hulu series. I saw it on Hulu. I'm not sure if it's a Hulu exclusive, but I saw him in Fleischman is in Trouble. Have you seen that?
I still haven't seen that.
It's really good, and he's really good in it. Claire Danes is also in it, and it's one of those shows that sort of shifts perspective in an interesting way, and it's got a lot of surprises too. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it already, but I was like, oh, he's good. Like he's more than just this type of part.
Yeah.
And he has a real range to him, and he's been making movies since he was really young.
Yeah.
With really good filmmakers. Like he was in Noah Baumbach film, Squid and the Whale, I think, and so he's been around. It's like when somebody says that Greta Gerwig's a good filmmaker. I was like, well, she grew up on film sets.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's been doing this since she was like in her teens, so of course she's good by now. Do we know if that film is getting distribution yet?
I didn't look into that, unfortunately. I can't imagine it's not. With that star power behind it, with winning a screenwriting award at Sundance,
And
one of the
Culkin
most
just won the
prestigious.
Emmy too.
Yes. So, and I will. Another thing about the film that really helps lend it the authenticity to the proceedings is because he's a Polish composer. It's filled with Chopin.
Oh, okay.
So every morning, when you wake up into a new scene, it's more Chopin for you. And I thought that was really a nice touch. Rent Free begins in New York City.
Fantasy film.
Yes. Begins in New York City, and when you get to the establishing location, there's a title card on the screen that tells you the address, the bed bath, and the rent. And that's a recurrent thing throughout the film. So these guys are going to stay with some friends of theirs who live in the city. The guys, Ben and Jordan. They're best friends since high school. They appear to be just out of college, so early 20s. And they're going to stay with their friends, mutual friends in New York City, and make something of themselves. But they end up kind of torpedoing that opportunity. So they go back to Austin, Texas, where they're from, with their tail between their legs, and they try to decide what they're going to do.
Is there another rent card that's much less?
Absolutely, but still unwieldy. And so they decide, hey, you know what we should do? Let's crash with friends. Let's couch surf. Let's save all of our pennies. Let's try to live the next year rent-free, and then we'll save up our money and we'll go back to New York and try and do it on our own. Over the course of this year, they find themselves, staying here, staying there, friends. They test a lot of bonds of those friendships, as happens when you let friends stay in your home. They test the bonds of their own friendship as they, again, sort of torpedo places through actions. It's very funny. It's very hard to watch at times because they are somewhat self-destructive, but it's an eye-opener. And as someone who is from Texas and spent some time in Austin, I saw a lot of familiar locations, and it does open the eyes of those who aren't aware of what, the tenant situation is like right now in this country, in that state, in New York City, and what the youthful experience is in a world that is quickly and rapidly pricing a lot of people out of existence.
Yeah, I was, as you were thinking that, I'm like, is this a reality show? Like, it sounds like a reality competition show. People just trying to survive in New York City. Like, I've had to find apartments here. Most of the people that I know have had to couch surf or been somewhat homeless for a period of time, and just trying to find a place to land. And if you have a job, that's a second job. I mean, the film sounds like a horrible nightmare. Honestly, like it feels like it's going to bring back a lot of traumatic memories.
The leads are quite charming. Ben and Jordan, they're fun to watch. Ben is the more destructive of the two. He just makes a lot of bad decisions, but he has a good heart, and I enjoyed it.
Saturday Night. It's written and directed by Jason Reitman and Gil Keenan, the team that did Ghostbusters Afterlife and Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I should say. And kind of like with Ghostbusters, there is a lean on nostalgia, but this movie is about literally the 90 minutes that led up to the first Saturday Night Live in 1975. So 90 minutes that lead into 90 minutes. And all of the chaos surrounding this, at the time, countercultural revolutionary show, now in its 50th season with Lorne Michaels still at the head. And this is really about Lorne trying to bring all the disparate pieces together. Lorne is played by Gabriel Labelle, who was the star of The Fabelmans a couple years ago, and he does a tremendous job, alongside Rachel Sennott, who is becoming very quickly one of my favorite actresses, playing Lorne's ex-wife, Rosie Schuster. The not ready for primetime players are all represented, with varying degrees of verisimilitude in appearance and style, like Corey Michael Smith from, he played the Riddler in Gotham. He plays Chevy Chase, and he nails it. Ella Hunt, she plays Gilda Radner, and I saw Gilda. Like, she absolutely knocked it out of the park. Lamorne Morris from New Girl plays Garrett Morris, no relation. Absolutely fantastic. Nicholas Braun from Succession plays a double bill of Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson. Matthew Rhys plays George Carlin. Kim Matula does a really fine job as Jane Curtin. Emily Fairn playing Lorraine Newman. Their parts are relatively small. Dylan O'Brien, who's an up-and-comer, he plays Dan Aykroyd, and then Matt Wood plays John Belushi. Everybody is represented here in all of their wackiness. You also have, like, Billy Crystal off in the wings. You have Franken and Davis. You have Tommy Dewey playing the first head writer, Michael O'Donoghue, who was also the first one to ever say a line on the show in the Wolverines opening sketch with Belushi. A lot of these people are either relatively new or still not quite A-listers, but you can recognize them. Like I said, Corey Michael Smith, he was on Gotham, 10 years ago. I don't know why he's not a bigger star. He's a tremendous character actor. And Rachel Sennott, she got her big break with Shiva Baby, and then did Bodies, 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 and she does a podcast with Io Adibari. The film, again, it's very frantic, very frenetic. There's a ton of great camera work. The cinematography is really well done here, following everybody around in these long extended takes around Studio 8H, as everything weird goes on in the background, stagehands are coming in left, right, and the center. Everything kind of just builds to this whole idea of Can we get the show off the ground? Are we going to even make it to air? Willem Dafoe plays an NBC executive named David Tebbutt, who was responsible for landing Johnny Carson back in the 60s. And he's kind of the boogeyman antagonist with his finger on the button, ready to just toss to a rerun of the previous night's Tonight Show if this doesn't go off. And one of the things that struck me as kind of odd about this film is that this is a Sony production, not a Universal. NBC basically has no real involvement with this, which I think is a good thing because it allows the film to take certain liberties. It allows them to basically make David Tebbutt and Dick Ebersol into villains, which I don't think Universal would let them get away with. It lets us be a lot more adult with the humor because Catherine Carton plays a network standards and practices censor who's redlining the script as we go, but she's so ultra conservative Christian that she doesn't know euphemisms like blue or golden. And all these writers are basically trying to talk in circles around her to try to convince her that, oh, no, this is perfectly safe and tame, not going to offend anybody. It makes for some good comedy, especially when Tommy Dewey as Michael O'Donoghue just confronts her directly and just calls her on the nonsense. You got a lot of fun aside. John Batiste, who kind of composed the score for the film, subs in for Billy Preston and gets to perform Nothing from Nothing, which any excuse you can give to have him have screen time, I'm happy with that. Weirdly to me, the least impressive performances are from the biggest name actors. Like I said, I love Willem Dafoe, but he plays David Tebbutt as just a scum-sucking executive. You know, just a money man with indoor sunglasses and a leisure suit. Like he kind of reminds me of Al Pacino's character from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Just that kind of sleazy money man. It doesn't really. It's not a bad performance by any means, but it's not. There's nothing really for him to work with to do anything beyond the minimum. J.K. Simmons, Academy Award winner J.K. Simmons, plays Milton Berle. His moments are funny, but all I saw was J.K. Simmons doing a Milton Berle impression. Not that that's a bad thing, but again, when you have the likes of Corey Michael Smith and Ella Hunt actually convincing me that they're Chevy Chase and Gilda Radner, J.K. Simmons could only do a vague impression of Uncle Milty. And it's done for the grossest reasons, but I kind of love it. Finn Wolfhard is in this movie. You know, one of the biggest stars of his generation. He plays a page, just an NBC page standing outside handing out the free tickets to the show. It's kind of amazing how much the big stars have almost nothing to do, and these people who are basically trying to prove that they're ready for primetime are playing the not ready for primetime players. I think it's a very interesting juxtaposition. The script plays a lot like Birdman or Aaron Sorkin's Steve Jobs movie. There's a lot of Sorkin-y type dialogue in there, which your mileage may vary. I'm okay with it, especially because it's a little bit riskier. It's a little bit more honest for the era when it comes to drug references and sexual humor. And honestly, you know, let's just call it what it is, sexual harassment. I mean, it was 1975. This kind of stuff was generally allowed. Not that we condone it, not that we approve of it, just it's admitting what's there. The only flaw I really have for the script is that it makes Lorne Michaels almost too much into a doe-eyed wanderer. This is all about him trying to make sure that this project gets over the finish line, gets to air when he's basically set up to fail. You know, how accurate all of that is to the reality of the first episode of SNL, I don't know. I mean, I know that David Tebbutt did not literally have his finger on the button waiting to dump out. You know, that never happened. But it makes for good dramatic tension. Because we know the show's going to go off. It's been going off for 50 years. I mean, so you have to at least pretend to have a risk in that respect. They played a little bit too safe with Lorne as this, visionary who's just, trying to do a good thing. I think it could have stood to have him be a little bit more raw, a little bit more confrontational, for lack of a better term. But for what it was, I was very pleasantly surprised by it. And again, Gabriel Bell, he made his mark with the Fablemans, and now he's kind of, like, in essence, establishing himself more as an adult actor. Like he was an adult when he played, Sammy Fableman, but he was an adult playing a teenager. Now he's an adult playing an adult. So I think he did a very good job. And again, Sennott, Smith, Hunt, Morris, they absolutely nailed it. And it's that force of personality that they bring to people who are still around. I mean, yeah, some of the actors are dead. Pretty much all the executives are dead. So yeah, like David Tebbutt cannot defend himself against whatever's going on. But among the original cast of the show, everybody but Gilda and Belushi are still around. So they can always raise a stink about this. And I think in that respect, this cast did justice to them. And this script did justice to them. I'm very surprised that NBC and Universal don't seem to have had any direct influence on this. This is very much a Sony production. But if you're gonna do something madcap and zany about the most madcap and zany show in television history, I think this is the way to go about it. I think it was really well done.
It's interesting because I remember George Clooney said that you shouldn't have really famous people playing famous people. And I think this is why. I think the reason that you had better results is because J.K. Simmons. You know what he's like, and maybe they thought, well, we'll just have J.K. Simmons do a Milton Berle impression, and that'll be enough. Like, that'll be funny. I haven't seen it. I have mixed feelings about it because I remember a lot of the old Saturday Night Live, and it was kind of a thing that was in reruns that when you grew up, and it just seems weird to see other actors like cosplaying those same people.
I had a similar apprehension because again, all but two of them are still alive. A weird personal anecdote, like, for people who get into the television and film industry, this has always kind of been like a dream show. And for me, literally, like, I have a recurring dream where I'm somehow hosting or in the cast, and I'm backstage waiting for my next cue, waiting for my next sketch, waiting for my next costume change. And now, as a person who works in television, who does behind the scenes stuff, when you see all this madness come together, it hits home. So I've experienced this stuff firsthand, and that's kind of why I think it informs the recurring dream in a weird way. This is probably the most important show in the history of television. For the meta purposes, they definitely understand what goes into a massive production like this, and there's a reason it sustained itself for 5 decades. And I think that understanding overrides the misgivings I had about, playing people who still are on this side of the earth. I can see where people may be apprehensive and may not like it. I can totally understand that, but for me, that's what got it over the top.
Seeds. It's a horror comedy where I would call it more a thriller comedy. Horror, I think of, like, I don't know, monsters and like more like that, I guess. But anyway, it was written, directed, and starred Ganito Horn, and she had been in Alice Darling and Reservation Dogs, if anybody knows that. And she is from, I have the pronunciation here, I have to look at it, Ganawage, and it's a Mohawk reserve outside of Montreal. She grew up on an Indian reservation. She plays herself in terms of her name, but she's called Ziggy, and she's a Toronto-based influencer. And she signs a contract with this, like, major fertilizing company, but things take a disturbing turn after she heads back to her indigenous community where she grew up to house sit at her aunt's house, because her new client has horrific plans, basically, to destroy the environment and hurt her loved ones. And she has, like, no internet connection there, so there's that feel of being, isolated. And she totally embarks on a battle of survival. So there's blood, there's that, and there is that, I guess horror in terms of someone in the house, what's happening, what's going to happen, being attacked. It's dark, definitely, but it's funny. There are funny parts, really great acting, a real indie feel to it. Um, she's a tough, bad, you know what? And the I have to look again. Ganitio, was inspired by Home Alone. That's how she started. She was like, I want to be, and she's like, and then she was, I also love Shaun of the Dead. So that's where it comes from. She she never thought it would turn into this, like, with political, stuff going on and cultural. She didn't know it would turn into that, but it did. And it was funny too. And she came out before the movie. She's like, please, there are parts that are supposed to be funny, so please laugh, and you might gasp. And but it was definitely like dark and possibly, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't think I cried as much in this one. There were parts though. There were some parts that I cried a little bit. But I don't know if I normally would have seen it, but I'm glad I did, and I highly recommend it. I think it was very, very cool.
Thelma from Josh Margolin, who wrote and directed this film, based it on a somewhat true story about how his grandmother was swindled out of some money by some hackers, essentially. In the film, the actress June Squibb, who is an Oscar-nominated actress, but she's always been in a supporting role. Now she's the lead at 94.
Oh, wow.
And her character, Thelma, is swindled out of $10,000 by a phone scam and takes it upon herself to track down the bad guys and get her money back. And she's inspired by watching the Mission Impossible films with her grandson and him telling her that Tom Cruise does all his own stunts. She was like, I could do that. And so she takes off to go try and catch them, much to the chagrin of her adult children, Clark Gregg and Parker Posey, who go chase her down and try and stop her. So she's trying to evade them. She's trying to get to these scammers. She enlists the help of her very old friend, Richard Roundtree, who passed away last year after this film finished wrapping. So like they meet in a senior facility and because she needs his scooter. And it's laugh out loud. It's heartwarming. It's endearing. It's inspiring. Again, it's one of those films that it's a singular voice. It's an action film, and the main star is 94 years old. It was so much fun. It was a delight in almost every way.
That sounds interesting. I mean, I would definitely watch, but it's probably a Netflix or an Amazon or you know.
Magnolia Pictures has the distribution rights now, so we'll see what they do with it. I'm curious to see where they put it. I was reading last night that we are undergoing a sociological event called the Graying of America. We have more senior citizens in America than we've had at any time in history, and that demographic,
the boomers are getting up there,
and they're living longer because of innovations in medical technology. So they have longer lifespans. So there's a market for this film, and I think Magnolia saw that, which is why they're like, I love it. It's fresh. It's oddly young and vibrant. Let's do it. And I think their investment's going to pay off. I think there's a market for this film, and I'm really looking forward to the people who get to discover it.
This next film has Bill Murray in it, and I will say that I did not know anything about it when I just knew it was called The Friend, and Bill Murray was in it, and so was Naomi Watts, and I said, "Oh, this will probably be delightful." Well, you see the first scene is sort of like you see the scene of Bill Murray, and it's very sort of Woody Allen-esque. It's a bunch of New Yorkers sitting around a table and talking. And then it's like smash cut to Bill Murray's funeral. He is a professor and an author, and he's a real character. I mean, you do see him in flashbacks, but he's dead 5 minutes into the movie or less. And he's this professor, author character with 2 ex-wives, a daughter, and several literary works. He's very well respected in the literary community. But, people have different feelings about him, and he has committed suicide. So it's an unexpected death. And Naomi Watts plays his best friend and I think his ex-lover. And she's picking up the pieces. She has to kind of deal with this in her own way, which is hard enough to do. But then the interesting thing, and this is where it sounds like a comedy premise. So she inherits his Great Dane. So his current wife, which is like wife number 3, didn't want this dog called Apollo. And the dog is a Great Dane. It's the biggest dog. It's the size of a small horse. And she's like, well, I don't actually like dogs. And Bill Murray's character, Walter, said that you would take the dog should anything happen to him. And she's like, well, he never told me this. Also, I live in a studio apartment that's rent controlled that doesn't allow pets. So as a New Yorker, I really related to the film because I know what it's like to live in a small apartment. I have a bigger than studio apartment, and I could not fit this dog into my apartment. So just that alone. And you think it's going to be like this comedy premise of like, oh, it's a movie star and a dog, and it's like Turner and Hooch or something like that. But it's really not. It's really like the dog and Naomi Watts' character, they're both mourning the loss of Walter, and they're both sort of in the wake of this horrible sudden death. And Walter has a daughter who is friends with Naomi Watts, and they're having scenes together. They're supposed to be co-editing the book together, but all of Naomi Watts' work, she's also a teacher and a writer, is getting derailed because she's got to take care of this dog. And then she's got the building breathing down her neck because they want to evict her because she's trying to keep this dog in a place you're not supposed to have dogs, which is very, very strict, especially in rent-controlled apartments in New York. So she's trying to find solutions for that. Again, sounds like it could be a comedy premise about her, in this Three's Company-esque farce trying to hide the dog but none of that happens. It's very, very serious. And it's a beautiful movie, and it's sort of a meditation on grief. And, like not a laugh riot. There's some very good performances in the film. You get a little, like a side character like Ann Dowd, who plays a neighbor. Carla Gugino, I think, is Bill Murray's first ex-wife. Constance Wu plays a very quirky character, but it's Watts' movie. It's Watts and Bing, who plays the dog Apollo. And there's a lot of scenes between the two of them together, and they're really good. It's surprisingly good considering one of them couldn't have read the script, and the dog is excellent in the film. Got a great expressive face, but it's really one of those films that it's a real New York story. It's very relatable, especially if you live here, and it's this woman going through this existential crisis. My one criticism is it was kind of slowly paced. There's a lot of incidents that take place that I thought could have happened faster or in shorter form, and this movie probably could have been an hour and a half because it's like it's a very simple premise, but all the moments are really, really good in it. And Naomi Watts is terrific. I think we kind of forgot what a great actress she is. But again, it's not for everybody. If you want a laugh riot, nonstop action, if you want to watch, Beverly Hills Cop or something, this is you're not in the mood for this movie. But hopefully it'll get seen because it is well done. And it's just a lovely, lovely film.
Things Will Be Different was one of the best movies I've seen this year. Really amazing concept. It starts out with a phone call, a brother and sister. They've just successfully committed a robbery, and they have to take the money and lay low. He's got a line on a safe house that's a farmhouse out on the edge of town. They get there, and then he follows instructions in a book that was given to him by the person who told him about the house. And they set some clocks, and they go into a room, and they pick up a phone, and they say some things, and they hang up the phone. They come out of the room. They're in a different timeline entirely. They're in a place outside of time, and it's this portal. And they just got to lay low for 2 weeks. They have a refrigerator stocked, meal plan stocked. And if they close the door and open it again, it restocks. They've got cabinets full of booze. They've got everything they need. And they just got to hang out for 2 weeks. So they hang out for 2 weeks. And then day 14 comes, and they go back to the door to go through to reset the portal. and it's blocked. It says, go to the mill. And they go to the mill outside, and that's when they discover they can't get out. The people who created the portal say, look, there's an interloper out there using our portal, leaving destruction in their wake. We can't track them. We can't find them. If you find them and stop them, we'll send you home. Another year goes by where they're waiting for this. The sister is desperate to get home to her daughter. Tensions are high. It's the mood of the film is just claustrophobic. There's a great score by Jimmy LaValle of the album Leaf that really just helps ratchet up the tension. The interloper does finally arrive, and once they start to reveal something about themselves, I'm like, I know who that is. I was able to figure it out, but I'm not going to tell you. But the conclusion is labyrinthine. It kind of wraps around on itself, and just a really great, it takes a lot of investment on the viewer's part to buy into the conceit right away, in the same sense that the characters on screen have to buy into it right away. But if you agree and take the ride, you're in for a real treat. It was a really awesome movie.
Weird.
Yes.
That sounds so. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what you're talking about, but it's probably one of the movies you just have to see.
Yes.
I'm having David Lynch flashbacks. But is it like clear, or you can feel like what? Because do things sort of like, do you feel like you're sort of out to sea with the film, or do they kind of tell you what the rules are, and are you able to get it, or do you have to work to get it?
You do have to work to get it. It is a film that pays off your commitment to the film. And there are some things that aren't explained. However, I will say one thing I really liked about this film was there was an early setup where you saw an item, like a Chekhov's gun type thing, and then it did come into play later, which is something that didn't happen in All You Need Is Death. The character of Alex was Russian, and they never explained where he came from or why. And he had a stutter that didn't go anywhere. This isn't Chekhov's stutter. This doesn't make sense. Things Will Be Different is meticulously crafted, tautly paced, and yes, you can wrap your head around it. And it is worth it to wrap your head around. They don't explain everything, but they give you enough of a structure for you to believe in what's happening.
I mean, I mentioned David Lynch. Did that evoke Lynch for you as well, or?
Yeah, I could see, especially with the labyrinthine nature of the story, kind of a Lost Highway kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to say too much because the film is the ride. But I will say watch it.
I always have so I have this thing with like Lynchian type constructions. So do you remember the film Mulholland Drive?
Yes.
Where were you on Mulholland Drive? Love it, hate it?
I enjoyed the ride. I wouldn't say I knew what happened during the ride. That was it's like when you ride the Joker ride at Six Flags and it just beats your head between the headrests and gives you a concussion. You're like, that was fun. Was it?
This is my caution because so I watched Mulholland Drive. I had it on VHS, I think, at the time. I rented it and I watched it and I thought I was paying attention to it. Like I thought, oh, and then when it just kind of ends, I went, wait, I must have missed something. What happened? So I immediately rewound it and played it again. I watched it twice in a row. And then when I discovered I still didn't know what the hell was going on, my thought was that Lynch had made the film and cut out all the parts that made the plot make sense.
And kept him for himself.
And then critics were like, it's genius.
Right?
And I was like,
what's happening? He's like, no, it's mine.
I was like, you don't know what it means either. You're just saying that so you don't look stupid. This isn't one of those movies, is it?
No, I don't think so. Now there's a discussion to be had if you watch it with friends at the end, in terms of how deep down the rabbit hole the film went. And that's open for discussion, but the film itself, I have a cat. The film itself, I think, is pretty encapsulated. I think, despite the labyrinthine journey, it is very self-contained and concise.
So this sounds more like science fiction-y. Where is this on your scareometer?
Again, there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of the unknown. So I would give it like a 1.5, but definitely more of a thinker than a scarer.
This is the BTRP Media Network.